This is what Israeli forces managed to do in 3 weeks of its aggression on Gaza. Killed more than 8,000 people, almost half of them are children. Injured over 20,000. Erased about 900 families entirely from the records. Buried 2,000 people under the rubble of their bombed houses. Some are dead and some are alive, and there is no way to get them out because civil defense crews lack the equipment. Bombed 60 hospitals and health facilities. Attacked schools, universities, mosques, and churches. Caused a major blackout on the entire Gaza Strip. Cut off communication completely for days, causing a media blackout. Caused a shortage of water, food, medicine, and fuel. Displaced over 1 million Gazans from their houses. Launched major carpet bombing attacks, wiping out entire neighborhoods. This is real-time genocide happening in front of your eyes. Do not turn your backs. Over 2 million Gazans need you to be their voice when they go silent.
Welcome to Israel Watch, that covers the attacks conducted by Israeli forces on the Gaza Strip, especially the bloody massacre at Al-Ahli Al-Mamdani Hospital, as well as US President Joe Biden's visit to Israel and the Lebanese resistance's response to Israeli aggressions on the borders that took place amid fears of Iran's involvement in the conflict. In this episode, Hadi Al-Kubaisi, a researcher and observer of Israeli affairs, joins us. Welcome to Israel Watch. Despite military censorship imposed on Israeli media outlets and restrictions imposed on the coverage of the bloody massacre that the Israeli forces committed at Al-Mamdani Hospital in Gaza, Channel 13 justified the massacre and hinted that the Israeli regime is responsible for the attack, despite the Israeli army's attempts to disavow the incident.
The bombing of the Al-Mamdani hospital is the most important message. At the end, a war is on the way here, and it's either us or them. Even if mistakes such as this incident occurred or not, Israel is obliged to continue its war on Gaza. Israel should not be influenced by protests taking place in Arab countries, neither by the international pressure nor by the US itself, and should continue to fight the Islamic Jihad and Hamas to destroy them so that no enemy remains behind the border fence and possess a threat to the residents of the Gaza envelope.
Mr. Hadi Al-Kubaisi, it's either them or us. That's how the Israeli reporter justified the massacre against Palestinian civilians at Al-Mamdani Hospital, although the Israeli army tried to deny any involvement in it. What do you think?
It's either them or us is the current entitlement, as after the operation of Al-Aqsa Storm, the Jews felt that they have either to leave this land or eradicate Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. Thus, Jordan has categorically opposed the displacement that will begin in Gaza and end with the West Bank. Israel's descending path that began in 2000 has led them to that entitlement that they used to talk about. During the past 3 to 4 years, they talked about the invasion of settlements, about an existential war, and about threats posed by the resistance axis nations, such as Iran, Lebanon, and Palestine. So they were expecting and seeing indicators and reached the point of entitlement and the moment of confronting realities, which are their army's weakness and the weakness of their internal political structure, as well as the negligence in the military institution.
It's an existential war.
In addition to the strengthened might of the resistance axis, which gave them confidence in the possibility of conducting new operations at such level, of course, it is an existential war for that regime, as they say half of the settlers would leave if Israel failed in Gaza. The settlers living near Gaza don't want to return, whether the war ended or not. Yesterday, some settlers' figures said, if the residents of Gaza remain, we will not return to the envelope.
Does the military resolution include hitting Palestinian civilians, committing bloody massacres, and undermining the health sector?
They have no other option but to continue striking Gaza for a very long time, so the residents express their opposition to the resistance, and that's their plan. Meanwhile, the options available on the other side, and that have already taken place in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and soon in Yemen, will change the path of the confrontation and extend its zone. The confrontation won't remain confined to Gaza. Confrontations now exist in Gaza, the West Bank, and South Lebanon, and have moved to East Syria and Iraq's Anbar, and will move to Yemen. The change in the confrontation zone will change the Israeli path.
U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to Israel has gained wide attention from Israeli media, especially because of his absolute support for the aggression on Gaza, and as he expressed support for Israel in the case of the eruption of any war on the northern front with Hezbollah and therefore Iran.
Biden said the threat posed to Israel by Hezbollah in the north and Iran is not a threat to Israel and the Middle East alone, but he sees it as a threat to the U.S., and that's an issue of great importance to Israel that it should take advantage of. Secondly, Biden told Netanyahu and the War Cabinet that the U.S. supports Israel's right to defend itself completely and freely. But Biden has asked for the opening of a humanitarian corridor in Gaza. What's important is that when Israel feels a rocket threat from the north, there will be a U.S. aircraft carrier and rockets in the air.
The support expressed by Biden was interpreted by many Israelis, including social media users, as an American attempt to salvage the weak entity that can't confront the war alone.
What a shame. Israel is weak and needs an American support. A small boy who is in a crisis and looks for someone to save him from the reality he lives in. Biden came because he feels how much Israel is weak and doesn't rely on Netanyahu. Despite his support, Biden seems disgusted by Netanyahu's weakness and confusion. Israel is in danger and begs for intervention of the president of another country to help it.
Mr. Hadi Al-Kubaisi, what's your take on these comments and on the absolute support expressed by Biden to Israel's aggression on Gaza, especially after he said that the intervention of Iran and Hezbollah will pose a threat in a way or another to the U.S.?
During this departure from Israel by flight yesterday, Biden changed his stance and told Al Arabiya, "We didn't tell Netanyahu that we will intervene if Hezbollah intervened in the conflict." That came as the U.S. statements since day one, October 7th, have asked Hezbollah on a daily basis not to intervene. But Hezbollah conducted attacks on a daily basis and ascendingly. So Americans felt embarrassed and understood that Hezbollah is not afraid of them, as Putin has told the Americans before that the Lebanese people are not afraid of anyone. Practically, the measures taken by the resistance in Lebanon challenged the American limits. So Biden was forced to retreat, and before that, the U.S. sent a letter to Iran's ambassador to the UN in which it said, if Iran intervened, America would intervene, so they raised the ceiling of the possible interventions. Regarding the U.S. support in general, they support Israel militarily, politically, and through decreasing the popular political and media pressure in the Arab world, and therefore Israel won't be affected by the incidents and can move forward towards its goal. The U.S. supports Israel economically and militarily, but asked it not to embroil America in a regional war.
Because they're both lives. And I'm turning in these medals today for the people of Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine, and all victims of occupation across the world. And I'm giving back my medals for the children of Iraq and Afghanistan. May they be able to forgive us for what we've done to them. This medal I'm dedicating to the children of Iraq that no longer have fathers
job well done? Do they mask lies, corruption, and abuse of young men and women?
I want to make clear Israel's position regarding a ceasefire. Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. This is a time for war, a war for our common future. Today we draw a line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. It is a time for everyone to decide where they stand. Israel will stand against the forces of barbarism until victory. I hope and pray that civilized nations everywhere will back this fight. Because Israel's fight is your fight. Because if Hamas and Iran's axis of evil win, you will be their next target. That's why Israel's victory will be your victory. But make no mistake, regardless of who stands with Israel, Israel will fight until this battle is won.
הכביש, אז הנה, בבקשה. זיבל גורר מחבלים החוצה.